Welcome to week 108 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We finished episode 522 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Monday, August 18th, 1986. While Sophia distracts the policeman by reenacting one of her movie roles, Kelly packs her suitcase. Cece comes up and gets Kelly and Eden's passports. He doesn't tell her why, but I think he's probably going to have some sort of forgery done so that everyone thinks it's Eden that's going out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly packs her suitcase, and Cece instructs Pearl to take the suitcase, throw it down the dumbwaiter, run downstairs, and then bring the suitcase over to the Lockridge property. Meanwhile, Kelly runs out the back way, past presumably the gazebo, to the Lockridge house. Eventually, the police officers downstairs having tea realize that Kelly has gone. And luckily for everyone, they decide to search Kelly's apartment. And they both head out. Sophia and Cece then have all the freedom they want to saunter over to the Lockridge property. And Sophia gives Kelly instructions on who to talk to when she gets to the villa. Cece seems a little annoyed when Kelly wants to privately say goodbye to Pearl, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
I think he really doesn't want Pearl and Kelly to be a couple, and I think he's getting some vibes off one of them that could happen.
Yeah, I mean, just think if he objected to Joe, how much he objects to Pearl, who, as far as he knows, is still only a butler. I don't think he's really put together that Pearl is from this prominent family in Boston.
Interesting they're not getting Courtney to help with this scheme. Pearl stays back to say goodbye to Kelly, and Kelly asks Pearl to write her, but he says the police will probably be looking out for something like that, and it's probably best if they don't write. So I think this may give them a reason for when she comes back, maybe not being as close as they are now, because they'll be separated by many months. So Cece and Sophia return to take Kelly away. And I guess tomorrow, Robin Wright will be reporting for duty on the set of The Princess Bride. Sophia and Cece go to what looks to be a room at the Capwell Hotel, where Cece has a bunch of dresses for Sophia to try on. And we have a bit of a montage while she tries them all on for him. And at the end, she puts on a red one. He says, "That's the one. That's the one I want to take off of you."
Now, these are all very sparkly, 80s dresses. So it's kind of fun if you have nostalgia for that era to see this whole array of very 80s outfits being paraded in front of you.
One thing during the scenes when Kelly was packing, I know we've talked in the past about what other staircases there might be at the house. And at one point, Cece says, "I'll go back downstairs. I'll go down the back stairs and come in through the study." So I don't think he means through the study itself, but through that hallway at the back where you go to the study. So there is definitely a back stairs that can go from upstairs down to the floor with the study. Santana waves the gun around at the beach party and tells Cruz if he really doesn't think she's a killer, why not step forward and take his chances? Keith volunteers to change the record that ends. As you recall, Ted is doing a marathon session as a DJ at that very party. And Keith takes the opportunity to flick some switches and broadcast the situation over the airwaves. Santana takes way too long to figure that out because Keith's voice is echoing throughout the entire place for about 2 minutes. And she ends up just yanking out all the cords. Nick arrives and doesn't manage actually to make things better or worse. Santana says he's Cruz's friend and is probably there to help drug her and send her to prison. Nick tells her that You know, this thing with you and Cruz kind of reminds me of me and Kelly. You find that nothing is real. So this was some nice insight into Nick. Didn't help Santana, though.
No, no.
But it was there for the Nick Kelly storyline, so I appreciated that line, actually.
Yeah.
And then we start to hear sirens as a result of Keith's earlier SOS. Santana tells everyone that Gina and Keith switched her allergy pills. And it's quite shocking that everyone does not seem to believe her. Like, no one really says, oh, that makes sense, even Cruz, which is probably very annoying to her. Of course, Gina steps forward to deny anything and says, I am always getting blamed for things around here. And then she decides, it seems like she's doing this on purpose. Everyone else thinks it's a bad idea. I'm not sure what she's angling for. But she decides the best thing to do would be to get Santana extremely angry with her. She steps forward and tells Santana that Brandon was a lot happier with her than she was with Santana, who she then calls a half-crazed terrorist. And she raises the gun at Gina. Nick sort of reaches for it, and the gun goes off. And Gina is shot. I wonder if this was Gina's plan to add sympathy to herself.
Yeah, I mean, at first I thought it was just Gina being Gina and kind of pushing a scene to its limits, which she tends to do, to evoke the most drama out of a scene possible. But I also think that she's taking a bit of a risk that she might actually be killed. But, coming out of this alive, which I assume she will, it really is very much a sympathy situation for her, and I think it looks really bad for Santana. I think this really is a way to make sure there's no return for Santana in terms of ever getting Brandon back.
Because I think maybe she thought, oh geez, it's not going to take Cruz too long to realize Cruz and I did switch the pills, and then Santana will be, maybe get off the charges. I need to ramp up the charges for Santana and have a lot of witnesses around me.
Yeah.
So, and then there's another possibility, I suppose, that they put on bulletproof vests earlier when they were being hunted by Santana. That might be a little twist. But Lieutenant Redgate comes up on the megaphone and says, what's going on there, everyone? And Cruz shouts back and forth to him and, says, don't come any closer. And Santana takes the opportunity to grab a hold of Eden as a hostage, as Keith begs her to take Gina out because she's wounded. And you see all these extras that were dancing in the previous episode to take the opportunity to quickly slip out too, as Gina and I think Nick are carrying Santana out of the beach bar area. Haley vanishes at that point too. We don't see Ted again, so he's gone. It's really just Santana, Eden, and Cruz there.
Well, Ted actually has some rather stern words for Gina or for Santana on his way out. And Eden, up to this point, has not been taking it from Santana either. So Santana's not winning a lot of sympathy with this ploy. The only one who's mildly sympathetic to her is Nick, and she's not really warming up to him either.
And then who should appear around the corner but Rosa? And she says to Santana, Cruz can talk to the judge. And Cruz says, yeah, I'll do everything in my power. And this gets Santana really angry. She says he always chooses his words carefully, so it sounds like he's promising something good. And then generally fails to follow through, I guess, or succeed. She then demands Brandon and Cece's helicopter will show up before she'll release anyone.
And it's kind of funny throughout this scene, she's kind of grabbed hold of Eden and is holding the gun on her. But the actress playing Santana is much, much smaller than Marcy Walker. So she's kind of on tippy toes trying to make this threatening stance work. They probably would have been a little more evenly matched if we were seeing the first Santana than this one, who's very tiny. But you can see they're both kind of struggling to make the scene work. Marcy Walker's trying to make herself a little bit smaller, and the actress playing Santana is trying to make herself a little bit bigger just so that the scene makes some sense.
Mm-hmm. Eden says, "Okay, I'll call my dad, and get the helicopter," but he doesn't answer because, of course, he's in the hotel with Sophia. Rosa says, "I've never been ashamed of you. I've always been proud. When we came to this country, we knew that everything we had made in Mexico could have been lost." So this is some backstory on the Andrade family, that both Ruben and Rosa, at least, came from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
They both have accents, so it's, I guess, not surprising. It makes me wonder about something that happens in the future that may or may not sync up with this Andrade history. But we'll have to wait several years for Rosa to return to the cast before that storyline takes place.
Well, we already know the Andrade family has conveniently lost 2 daughters.
Mm-hmm. Well, they've apparently lost a whole lot more, but we'll find out in about 3 years. She says, "You've done well, Santana. Don't let your mother's life and all of her dreams be in vain." Then Rosa says, "I'll go and get Cece." So it's just Cruz, Eden, and Santana. Santana asks if, you guys have both been incommunicado for the last day and a half. Did you sleep together? And Cruz says that they didn't. And I guess we saw them on the beach necking a lot. Not clear whether they did sleep together. And then Santana decides to do something a bit kooky. She decides to reminisce about all the times she and Cruz made love and how all the wonderful things he said to her. And Eden gets more and more uncomfortable as the scene progresses. So she is thinking she's going to throw a little wrench into this Cruz and Eden reunion, even if she's about to go off to jail.
And in all fairness, I mean, it's obviously to, as you say, to make Eden uncomfortable, but I think anyone would be uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be someone who's got a romantic interest in Cruz, because it does get quite explicit.
Mm-hmm. Macintosh shows up at the Capwell mansion. She says, Pearl wonders, how'd you get away from Dr. Rawlings? She goes, well, I don't get out of a marriage like that without knowing some tricks. So she says that she had wanted to keep silent this whole time to protect the one woman who could tell Pearl everything. Her name is Alice, and you've probably already met her. Mm-hmm. Dr. Rawlings brought her from Boston with him so he could keep an eye on her. Mm-hmm. So that is an interesting twist.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was always the plan, or if Robin Wright's leaving meant we need another woman to hang out with Pearl while he searches for the truth. And they conveniently came up with this. Maybe it was going to be him and Kelly interrogating Macintosh originally, but now it's him and Alice interrogating Alice. I think maybe we'll finally get Alice speaking soon, I hope.
I hope so. It'll be a pretty quiet interrogation otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Pearl breaks into the state hospital where he runs into Owen, who apologizes for basically tattling on him and Kelly. He says, Dr. Rawlings promised him freedom, and I think Pearl, had previously said to Kelly, I don't think he's ready for freedom, and he says to Owen, oh, you trusted, the wrong guy. So he pretty much forgives Owen, but to make it up, Owen does tell him where they moved Alice, which they did immediately after he and Kelly escaped. Alice does not want to talk about Boston or Brian. Pearl gives her a nice blue dress, and his reason is because he plans to sneak her out of there. She likes the dress so much that she actually does her hair differently, and he says, I've got 2 visitors' passes that I stole or got somehow. We're just going to walk right out of here. They say goodbye to Owen. I suspect this might be the last time we see Owen. Next thing we know, they're at the Lockridge house where Pearl has set up a pull-out cot and a little desk and a couple of other things. And Alice rearranges it so that it's in the same formation as in her, I want to say, cell. And then he decides to press her on the interrogation a little bit. He says, I'm actually Brian's brother. I'm Michael Baldwin Bradford. And she shouts, no! So maybe she'll very quickly remember exactly what happened. I don't know, if she witnessed exactly what happened. That might be the way she stopped talking, but then, she was already institutionalized, obviously. So I don't know. We'll see.
One thing I did notice is that during this scene with Pearl and Alice, we hear the music that we had previously heard with Pearl and Courtney.
Oh.
So that makes me wonder if they're even setting these two up in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like they've been testing several different pairings recently, even just with one-offs, and we saw how Gina and Keith, had a couple of small, nice run-ins before they suddenly decided, well, these two have to be together.
Yeah, and it also makes me wonder if there's going to be, I don't know, perhaps some kind of issue with Courtney down the road when we start talking about Madeline's murder again. Just because those two seem to be kind of a neat couple, but they've really, really done everything they could to pull them apart, and not pull them apart in such a way that they're, this madly in love couple being kept apart like Cruz and Eden. So I'm wondering if we're going to find out a little bit more about Courtney down the road that would not match up with a relationship with Pearl.
Yeah, I can't remember anything about Courtney from this point on, so it'll all be a surprise to me. We forgot to mention that as usual, we watch Falcon Crest every Friday night, and we've seen Dr. Renfro once or twice before, but we saw him in this last week's episode. And who was his partner in crime but Gary Allen, who we know better as Owen, who is credited as Owen Moore, but I think he said his name was Owen. His real name was Owen Cohen last week. So anyway, that was fun to see Dr. Renfro and him. So he's had a run-in with two of our evil Dr. R characters from Santa Barbara.
And I believe in that Falcon Crest, the one we know as Owen, was actually playing a doctor. He's sort of a researcher in a laboratory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was kind of fun to see him in a role I probably wouldn't have. I guess our Falcon Crests are still in the earlier 80s, so we're actually before Santa Barbara for both of them. So, well, that is it for this episode. We'll be back after we watch episode 523. See you then.
Bye-bye.
What I can promise is that I will do everything in my power to see you're treated fairly.
Mama, listen to him. That's how he always is. He's always choosing his words very carefully so that he makes it sound like it's something good, like he's promising something good. And then you ask him where his promises are. And then he says, well, I never lied to you. You have this faith in justice that it's bound to arrive someday, any minute, any time. Well, I don't know why, because it never does.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished 12 hours of the coronation, and like all Canadians, have received a free crown. So that's one of the perks of being Canadian. Review of the coronation. Didn't see any Santa Barbara celebrities there. So we'll move on to another episode of Santa Barbara. Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 523 of Santa Barbara. Cece gives Sophia a necklace, and then takes off all her clothes at the Capwell Hotel. Cut to Cruz saying to Santana, I've loved you since we were kids. She says, I'm not talking about that kind of love. Cruz says, a feeling of family that some people never get close to. And Santana says, I didn't want to be your sister, I wanted to be your wife. Cruz says, I failed. And this is how you want it to end? And Santana's, of course, brandishing the gun all over the place. She has Eden in her grasp. And Mason appears out of nowhere with a beard and dressed in a white suit with a white tie.
Now, we're speculating that Lane Davies might have been in a Shakespearean play during his hiatus because he's looking very Shakespearean now.
In a very preachery cadence, Mason tells Santana that he feels her pain because it's very similar to his. All we have to do is let in the light.
Basically,
Come with me.
he seems to
Give
have
up the
been
struggle.
taken over by a cult, maybe? That he's giving off very culty kinds of vibes.
Mason gets her to give him the gun. At the police station, Rosa thanks Mason, and Gina arrives on crutches, having survived her gunshot wound, and asks Mason if he's rehearsing for heaven. Nick arrives, but they say he probably won't be allowed to see Santana without special permission because he's not family. Keith asks Gina to come to his place, but she's annoyed because he really wants to know what she has on Kelly, and she tells him that she's not coming. But then he shows up at her place, and he has guessed that she must have Dylan's gun, and starts looking through things for it. And as she's talking to him, she mentions that she knows exactly what happened that night, but she wasn't there. And then Keith remembers the surveillance tape that Cruz had been asking about and realizes that Gina must have that too. She won't tell him where it is, but they end up kissing. Back at the Capwell mansion, Cece and Sophia are home, and Eden tells them how Mason saved the day. They tell Mason they're getting married, and they're surprised by how happy he is. Mason gets a call from Lily. She's coming to Santa Barbara soon, says Mason. She's the reason I'm standing here. Mason tells Cece that all is forgiven. Everyone assumes that Mason has joined a cult.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the different characters kind of show it, because they all do their own sort of version of a double take when they see him in his beard and his white suit and speaking like someone very non-Mason-like.
Like, those people who go to a self-help thing and then they spend the next few weeks quoting all the things that they heard there. This is kind of a bit of the vibe we're getting.
Yeah.
Cruz and Eden meet at the beach bar. I guess the party ended. Cruz says, I ruined her life. Where do I have the right to be happy? Eden says, we can be so happy if we just let ourselves. So even though he's basically free of Santana, Cruz is still not willing to let go of his, his duty.
Yeah.
So there may be a bit of a drawn out thing of Eden trying to convince Cruz they should be together.
Yeah, and perhaps in the back of his mind he also feels like he failed Brandon a little bit too, because Brandon's kind of back where he started in a way. He's now back in CC's care. And as we know, it's perhaps just a matter of time before Gina actually joins them there as well.
I can see Rosa's point that, CC's stable and it's a place that Brandon likes to be. So.
Yeah.
But having been rooting for Santana since the first episode, this is somewhat annoying.
Yeah, and, we do have to remember, even before all of this drama with Santana, because she hasn't been quite as relatable lately, probably Santana and Cruz wouldn't be in this mess if CC hadn't put that rule down that Santana had to be married.
That's a good point. Back when they were back at the beach bar, when Mason was trying to talk Santana out of things, he did bring up the fact that he had offered to marry her. And
yeah.
She wouldn't be in this position if she hadn't picked Cruz.
Yep.
But in a very loving and culty way.
Yes.
So I guess we'll be meeting Lily in the next day or two. She'll be taking Robin Wright's salary. And find out just what Mason's been up to. See if there's any other, I'm going to say cult members as a wild guess that we will meet. In addition to Lily, we may find a cult taking over the Capwell Mansion at some point.
Well, you can imagine that if it is a cult or something cult adjacent, that having a wealthy Capwell as part of their membership would be very enticing to a cult leader.
Yeah. Yep. And, Santana's still not really in jail. She's constantly either being booked or sitting in the police station or in the hospital, so she hasn't actually gone to jail yet.
No.
But presumably something will happen with her. Now
I think so.
She's escalated things so much. And we'll find out the fallout of Ted's failed marathon. And we'll see if maybe Chad mentioned something to Haley when they were having that dance-a-thon.
Yep.
Maybe Haley will show up at work tomorrow morning knowing the secret of Roxanne. So that is it. We'll be back after we watch episode 524. And we might still be on location tomorrow. We will see. And hopefully we won't be surrounded by a sea of smoke, because apparently half the country is on fire today. All right. We'll see you next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I think it would take more than Lily Lightbulb to save me.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 524 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Wednesday, August 20th, 1986. Mason does an interview on television to advertise Lily Light's tent meeting. Now we found out her name is Lily Light, which Mason kind of alluded to last time when he talked about seeing the light. Gina and Keith are watching, and Gina tells Keith she thinks it's an act. Ted is watching at the radio station, and he thinks Mason's lost his mind. Cece and Sophia are watching on the wicker table in the atrium, and Cece tells Sophia that he thought Mason had lost a marble or two last night, and he's going to drop in on that tent meeting and see what's going on.
Now, was it my imagination, or I don't think we saw it, but I think it was implied that Keith may have actually mooned the TV while Mason was speaking.
I had it turned away from me because we were in a weird room, so I didn't actually see much of the episode. Lionel arrives at the Capwell house. He says the kidnappers are going to call him there, and when they do, they tell him to bring the money to the boathouse. Cece tries to convince Lionel to let him supply some guards, but Lionel says no, the kidnappers were adamant. Cece goes with him to the boathouse, because he says, I'm not leaving you alone with all this money, but Lionel convinces him to leave when they get there. The kidnapper appears, but runs off when a guard that Cece had secretly hired makes a noise. Lionel storms back to the Capwell house, angry with Cece. The kidnapper's phoned with a new drop point, but says this is his last chance. Cece wants to involve Cruz. Lionel says no. We're going to send Julia.
And as we were watching this scene unfold, at one point the security guard, we do see his head kind of pop up a little bit. And he's not really alluded to at first. And when I was watching it, I thought, I hope that's someone that Cece brought with him and not, just a crew member who has ended up in the shot. Which is what we might expect from an episode of Dark Shadows. Mm-hmm. And it was indeed a security guard of CC's.
I, of course, did not see him, so I was surprised when he appeared. Trying to see if the kidnapper had a voice that I recognized in any way, but I don't know. I don't know if it's one of our regular characters or not.
Maybe it's someone who will be at some point.
Keith tries to get Pearl to reveal Kelly's whereabouts. Courtney confronts Pearl for not contacting her the entire time he was away with Kelly. Courtney has been investigating Alice, and it turns out that she hasn't actually been undergoing any kind of treatment. Dr. Rawlings just had her on drugs the entire time. Pearl brings Courtney to the Lockridge house where he questions Alice about Brian. Alice reveals that she loved Brian. So a little bit of an alternate to what we thought, that McIntosh somehow was in love with Brian. So I'm thinking this revelation that there's no actually treatment for Alice may mean she doesn't actually have anything wrong with her. And that once the drugs wear off, she's just going to be a normal person and join the cast of Santa Barbara as just one of the regular characters.
Yeah, it would actually be really kind of interesting to see what sort of person she is when she's not so damaged. And that would mean she's basically being a prisoner of Dr. Rawlings, not a patient.
Mm-hmm. So it's probably been a couple days, so hopefully the drugs will wear off. But of course, I'm sure Rawlings is desperately searching for her. Although I can't imagine that he would think she'd be at the Lockridge house. But, he may have someone following Pearl or Courtney.
But you can see Courtney is not happy with Pearl because, of course, he kind of chose Kelly over her, went on this great adventure with Kelly, came back, got another girl who he seems to be, if not infatuated with, quite preoccupied with, and didn't contact her once. So...
Yeah. He kind of grabbed her chin at one point. Said, "Oh, you're very important to me." But no. Pearl's going to end up with no girlfriend after this.
Yeah, and Courtney at this point is very much in the friend zone.
Roxanne might be available at some point. Keith tells Mason he hopes his resignation was for real. Mason says that he's on a different path now that leads from darkness to light. He invites Keith to the meeting. Keith decides to investigate Lily Light and receives a startling report. Ooh. That's actually the final scene of the episode, so it'll be interesting to see if that was just a fake out and there's nothing startling at all in it.
And once again, it's really quite entertaining to watch all of the characters react to Mason's transformation, and we get quite a priceless scene, as you alluded to, when he's talking to Ted, and you can just sort of see Ted's face getting more and more incredulous as Mason is talking.
Mm-hmm. Gina decides the way to get Mason to come back to his senses is to get him drunk and try to seduce him. She tells this to Keith, but somehow they get distracted and they start kissing, which is when Mason walks in. And Gina pretends that she was giving Keith a birthday kiss. Mason, of course, knows that Keith's birthday is in December.
Mm-hmm.
Keith takes off, and Gina pulls out the champagne, which Mason declines, and doesn't seem to be succumbing to her advances either. And he tells her the story of how he lost consciousness in the church that day and woke up groggily in a car, and then when he finally stumbled out and into a tent, that he found that he was overcome with a blinding light.
Now, we already know, just from this little account, that whoever Mason is dealing with is a bit shifty, because we know it didn't quite go down that way.
Mm-hmm. He then bores Gina with his tales of his several weeks with Lily Light and how he prayed for Mary at every church they stopped at. She agrees to come to the tent meeting tonight, I think, to see what this Lily Light is all about.
Now, it's kind of fun in a way that, for Gina at least, a straight arrow, sober Mason is also a boring Mason.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually see Gina almost fall asleep a couple times during his long monologue about being saved.
Mm-hmm. Haley visits Gina. She asks Gina if everything Santana said about her is true, that she tried to drug her, and of course, Gina denies it. She tells Haley that she'll have everything she wants when Kelly comes back. Ted tells Haley she can't believe anything Gina says, and they end up having another fight.
I think Ted will be proved right up on this once again.
Mm-hmm. Mason tells Cece and Sophia that he no longer blames Cece or Julia for Mary's death. Cece asks Mason if this is just a phase. Mason says it's more of a metamorphosis. He invites Cece and Sophia to the tent meeting tonight. Cece says to Sophia, either we are witnessing a genuine miracle or the biggest con in Capwell history. We're thinking maybe Lily Light is the con artist, but Cece's not beyond thinking it could be Mason.
Well, either way, I mean, assuming that Lily Light really has got this influence on Mason, it'll be kind of interesting with all of these different people coming to this tent revival meeting, whether they come out of it as believers or not. And I keep thinking of various episodes of Star Trek I think we've seen over the years where the entire crew gets seduced by a robot or an alien entity, and Captain Kirk is the only one who can see through it and ends up having to save the crew. perhaps we will see something fun like that happen with the Capwells. Maybe they'll all be swept under Lily's influence, and one person will have to help them see the light.
Maybe by tomorrow we'll see Mason inviting Rick and Pearl and Lionel, and they'll all troop into the tent tomorrow. I believe we will be seeing Lily tomorrow, so that'll be her first appearance. And yeah, I guess they probably built a big tent set. We'll see what that looks like. I would have only heard this on audio originally, so I'm excited to see how they do a tent that's probably only going to be up for one episode on the soap opera budget.
It'll also be fun to see what the rest of Lily's followers are like.
Yes, that's true. Maybe Owen knows them. Mason visits Ted and asks him to play an ad for the tent meeting tonight. Mason says, just play it. I'll clear it with the station brass. So, it seemed a bit dodgy to me. I think if I were Ted, I would hold off. Ted tells Jane he just needs a sweet-natured woman. Like Roxanne, says Jane. Maybe, says Ted. Roxanne calls Ted and arranges to meet him at the station tonight at 8. Well, that's interesting, because that'll overlap with the tent meeting. So. And wasn't Ted working first thing in the morning when Mason was doing his broadcast? So he's had a long shift. I just presumed that meeting was in the morning. Haley notices some of Roxanne's clothing in Jane's bag and sees Jane come out of the bathroom, not looking like herself at all. At 8 o'clock, Roxanne arrives at the radio station and turns off the lights before Ted can see her. Ted says he needs to see her once and for all. Roxanne agrees he can see her afterwards. She approaches Ted in the dark, when suddenly Haley's hand reaches through the door and flicks on the light, revealing to all that Roxanne is Jane. Jane looks very annoyed and embarrassed.
That was actually a really fun way to reveal her, because it was so effective but so simple.
Yeah. So that'll be fun. It's going to come to a head. Ted will have now... I doubt he'll be happy with Jane or Roxanne, so now Ted's single and a couple of single women floating around the show.
Well, maybe there'll be some single gals at the tent revival.
Oh, yes, that's true. We're going to see who's left couple to couple and uncouple. I feel like Pearl and Courtney probably aren't going to make a good match at this point.
No, I don't think so. I really feel like Courtney could possibly do a bit better, unless she's the one who murdered Madeline, in which case all bets
in which
are
case off. She may try to murder Pearl too.
Yeah.
If she's, crazy. If she's not crazy and just murdered Madeline because she was annoying, then she may be spirited off to Europe in Sophia's chateau to hang out with Kelly. And that is it for episode 524. We'll be back for our Thursday episode number 525. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Oh, forgive me if I have my doubts, but you couldn't even seduce the old Mason.
Thanks a lot, Keith. You know, you can be very insulting sometimes.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to impugn your lack of virtue.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 525 of Santa Barbara, which originally aired Thursday, August 21st, 1986. And what was going on in the world at the end of August 86? Well, some top movies were The Fly, Stand By Me, Aliens, Top Gun, Ruthless People, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Legal Eagles, Howard the Duck, Short Circuit, and Hannah and Her Sisters. And in music, Madonna's Papa Don't Preach was number 1. Bananarama's Venus was number 3. Belinda Carlisle, Mad About You at 4. Lionel Richie, Dancing on the Ceiling. Berlin, Take My Breath Away from Top Gun. Peter Gabriel, Sledgehammer. The Monkees were on the charts with That Was Then, This Is Now. And that's not the most surprising band from the 60s that is in the charts. We've got Kenny Loggins with Danger Zone. Stacey Q, Two of Hearts. Modern Woman from Ruthless People. Mick Jagger with the theme from Ruthless People. And the Beatles with Twist and Shout from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And El DeBarge, Who's Johnny from Short Circuit. So that's what we were watching and listening to in the late summer of 86. Or at least late summer holidays, let's put it that way.
It's funny how things come around because, of course, the big show right now is Succession, which is due to have its finale in about a week. And one of the actors in that is Alan Ruck, who is, of course, in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Mm-hmm.
And his guest to, I think, the red carpet at the beginning of this season was one Matthew Broderick. Apparently they're good friends in real life. So.
And we've been watching Single Drunk Female, which, of course, has Ali Sheedy as the mom in it. And she is, of course, was in Short Circuit, which I still haven't seen.
And that show also had a brief appearance, I believe, by another Brat Packer, which was...
Molly Ringwald showed up in a recent episode in season 2. They, of course, were both in
The Breakfast Club. And I was just reading, actually in Entertainment Tonight, that Andrew McCarthy, who was in St. Elmo's Fire, along with a few other Brat Pack movies, is actually in the process of creating a documentary, which is a look back at the Brat Pack of the 80s. So everything old is new again.
And of course, we watch a lot of oldies in the evenings. We just finished Hill Street Blues season 6, and Jordan Charney was on as a different character than he was in season 1. That, of course, is Dr. Renfro. And we finally got around to McCloud in our NBC Sunday Mystery Movie Wheel. We watched the pilot of McCloud, which starred Mark Richman, better known to us as Peter Mark Richman, the second actor to be cast as C.C. Capwell, and the first one to be seen in the series itself.
And looking very young, I must say, in this 1969 pilot, and he's got kind of the mod haircut and no gray hair at all.
I think I have seen him in A Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. That would have been a year or two earlier. But looking at his credits, he was in Twilight Zone in the early 60s, so we probably saw him. And one thing I did mention last time in the credits, Cruiser, furnished by Regal Marina, which surprised me because I didn't think we could see a boat in the background at the boathouse. And in this episode, there's definitely no boat in the boathouse except for a rowboat that's up on its side that someone actually bumps into in this scene. So Regal Marina is getting credit for a ship that I don't think is actually appearing on screen. And let's get on to the episodes. Haley switches on the lights, revealing Roxanne to be Jane. Ted is angry with Haley for embarrassing Jane. Did that surprise you?
It did, actually. It turns out that the Ted is actually quite empathetic towards Jane in this situation. I think he understands just how embarrassing this is for her.
This leads to an argument with Haley. Ted says maybe, Ted's angry with her for embarrassing Jane and says maybe that's what she's like inside, which is a very interesting way to put things. No one talking about split personalities, which of course it's not, but would be suspicious. Haley responds that Jane could have told them she was Roxanne, to which Ted responds, "Oh, just like you could have told me that Gina was your aunt." And that, of course, leads to storming out again. He says it's obvious she has a very serious problem with men, with her identity. Haley says, maybe she just turns you on. And Ted says, you're becoming more like Gina. That's the bit that makes her storm out. Then Ted finds Jane crying, and she actually says, oh, I hate women like Roxanne, who are just like my mother. So this is interesting. We get another reference to Jane's mother. This time we find out that she was always traveling, but that she always seemed to have a way of getting men to do things or buy things for her. She says, part of me wants to have that power, but I hate women like that. Part of me wants to be innocent, have that delicate little femininity like Haley does. Ted wonders who the real Jane is. He makes her feel better by doing a macho Sylvester Stallone impression, saying that not everyone, that everyone else kind of feels like they're different on the inside than what they want to be on the outside. Haley finds Jane packing her things at the office, and Jane says she's moving out of the apartment too. Her mother's out of town and she'll stay at her place. Jane says, it seemed to me that the only way I could communicate on a sexual level was to pretend to be another person. I had to be this other person. I couldn't handle it as plain Jane. Haley apologizes to Jane and begs her not to quit and not to move out of their apartment. So, Santa Barbara summertime teen scene fun time. Now, we'll progress with, I guess, Jane and Haley and Ted hanging out.
But which version of Jane?
Maybe an intermediate Jane. Julia takes the ransom money to the Capwell boathouse. The kidnapper takes the money and says he'll make a phone call to have Augusta released. Julia and Lionel find Augusta tied up in the back of Lionel's car. They go to the Capwell house to give Sophia and Cece the good news. Augusta thanks Cece and he asks if she has any information they can give to the police about the kidnappers. She says, well, they had masks on their faces and they spoke in a whisper, which both Julia and Lionel say is what the kidnapper did every time they encountered them. She says, oh, they tried to indoctrinate me. I started to feel like Patty Hearst. Cece wants to call the FBI, but Augusta clearly is not willing to have that discussion tonight. Lionel says, oh, she's in no condition to be questioned. She wants to go home, and Cece tells Sophia, I smell a rat.
And there is something a bit off about this whole story.
I started to suspect that Augusta was involved in the kidnapping with the way she was acting, so I can see why Cece might have suspected the same thing. Instead of going home, though, Augusta says to Lionel, oh, I want to go to the Orient Express. And he's a bit confused because she was too tired to do anything a minute ago. And when they get there, she tells Lionel the kidnapping was a fake. She planned to get back some of Cece's money for Lionel. But there's more. The kidnapper was a man she's been in love with for a long time. And they're leaving town together. And they've left $1 million on Lionel's boat. So I don't know who this guy is. Obviously, the writers concocted him because Louise Sorel told them she was taking a job on One Life to Live, I guess. And so we are left to wonder who this mystery person is that we never saw, that Augusta never even mentioned to Julia. That must have been... She must have been seeing in parallel to all these scenes with Lionel that we saw. But then again, Lionel was meeting with Madeline, so maybe Augusta could have been meeting with Mystery Man.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be some guy she just met in Tibet a few weeks ago. It does seem to be a longer-term thing. I think in some ways, and maybe this speaks to perhaps how rapidly this storyline was put together, it was a bit of a chance on Augusta's part that Lionel would ask Cece for the money and get it from him. You know, if that was part of her motive, because it does seem like it would have been just as possible that, you know, Lionel would have gone into complete receivership from this and been ruined by it.
Yeah, that's interesting. My thoughts are maybe this is some guy she's known ever since Europe, before she married Lionel, you know, and that they've been in contact for decades, something like that. The guy didn't seem to have an accent, though, did he?
No.
Julia tells Cruz that Santana wants a divorce. Cruz and Eden have a date at the Orient Express and go back to the beach house to make love.
And Cruz and Eden seem to have a different song than usual. I couldn't quite place it. Maybe you have a bit more information on it, but
I wrote down some of the lyrics, but it's not one I remember being remember at all.
It's not their usual background song whenever they get together.
Could be that they're trying to test out a new song for them, because we've heard that Kenny Rogers one a few times too, as well as the Change in Me As You. So maybe they thought this would be phase 2. We need in phase 2 need a phase 2 theme. Mason rejects Gina's advances. She says she wants the old Mason back. Mason invites Gina to meet Lily. Mason's ad plays on the radio for Lily Light's Night of Inspiration. Mason apologizes to Julia, which shocks her, and invites her and Eden to the meeting. I could already see Eden wasn't going to go because she
Yeah.
had this
Yeah.
thing with the cruise that she was
Better
planning.
things to do.
Keith marvels at Lily Light's photo. That's what he was so shocked at when he opened up that dossier. He shows the photo to Julia, who says, "The resemblance is uncanny." Mason invites Keith to the tent meeting. "If it isn't the black sheep turned Lily White," says Keith. Keith mentions that Lily bears a striking resemblance to someone they know, but Mason just ignores it. Keith tries to show the photo to Gina, but she's in too much of a hurry. Keith, Gina, Julia, and Mason go to the Capwell house to pick up Sophia and Cece, and then they all head to the fairgrounds. And they had a pretty believable tent set up there.
Yeah, they did.
Quite a few folding chairs in a reasonably sized but small tent area. Mason asks everyone to be quiet in the tent because Lily likes quiet. The lights dim. It's like the start of a magic show. The music swells and Lily comes out from the back and stands at the podium, her face in shadow, and we're all wondering, which cast member could it be that this Lily Light so resembles? The lights come up, revealing her face, and Gina says, "She looks like me!" And she does.
Mm-hmm.
She looks a lot like Robin Manson.
Now, I have to admit, I was sort of hoping that the person that Lily Light would resemble was Mary, because that would explain so much.
I didn't even think of that.
But no.
Maybe that's what they were teasing. Maybe that actually was the thinking of the writers, but it just went over my head.
Yeah, well, or maybe they had originally thought of that and hadn't been able to secure the actress. But anyway, that was kind of what I was hoping. But no, it's a lady who, it is not the same actress who plays Gina and Lily Light, as far as we know. I think they're different actresses, but they do look a lot alike.
And I think, just judging from that interview with Lane Davies, I think he kind of, one of his complaints was that the actress they chose was way too young, really, to be playing this character, and that the only reason they hired her is because she did look so much like Robin Manson. They thought they could have some fun with that, but I think that may be part of the problem, because the next time we see Lily many years from now, they will have recast her. So, I mean, not the next time we see her. We'll be seeing her a lot in the story, but in the future, when they bring the character back, they choose a different actress. So,
now, I was thinking as I was watching this, this is not necessarily an unfamiliar phenomenon. And I believe when they updated Dynasty a few years ago, they actually ended up casting the same actress to play Fallon and the facially reconstructed Alexis, which is even more bizarre when you think about it. So this isn't completely odd to do this.
kind of reminds me of that Carol Burnett, that they just hired Vicki Lawrence because she looks so much like Carol Burnett. So, well, maybe I'll be cast in the next Mission Impossible movie. That is it for the events of this episode. So, let's see if Ted tells Jane, "You owe me a date." And they end up going on a proper date as a hybrid Jane, Roxanne. Her hair's a bit much, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Even though it was 1986, maybe that was not a lot for them. And we'll see if that Regal Marina cruiser shows up at the boathouse at some point. And Cruz and Eden are off on their own storyline. I don't think Cruz will be needed until the next murder or car accident, who haven't we seen in a while. Well, everyone who's on vacation is back. Mason, Eden, Augusta, and Lionel, I guess.
Santana's rotting in jail, apparently.
Yeah, we didn't even see her tell Julia I want a divorce. Julia just reported it to Cruz. So, well, maybe we will finally get that class reunion in a week or two. And that's it. Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to the Jane thing continuing. And I don't know how quickly Augusta leaves, but I thought she was only in 2 episodes, and we've seen her twice now, so it may well be next time we see Lionel telling Julia, "Oh, Augusta left town with some guy." And then maybe Julia will actually have some information about Ernesto or something, saying, "Oh, there was that guy years ago." So, but then Julia and Augusta weren't that close, I think, when Julia came back, so she wouldn't have really know that much. But yeah, I'm excited to see what Lionel does next, and obviously this whole secret boyfriend thing is to give Lionel a chance to move on and get another love interest, which I remember, and Nick Coster said was the actress that was most suited to him. So we'll see her, I think, in a few weeks, and there will be a couple of twists related to that actress that you probably will not see coming. So we will see what happens in episode 526. We'll see you when we've watched that. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
How can you trust anyone that looks that much like Gina? So, what is this, Gina? Another one of your long-lost relatives washing up on our shores?
Haley is my only living relative.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We finished episode 526 of Santa Barbara that originally aired Friday, August 22nd, 1986. Augusta tells Lionel she's running off with a man named Joseph that she's known for a long time. Lionel can't accept it and makes a circle of truth out of salt on the carpet. She says she woke up one morning and realized she didn't love Lionel anymore. Joseph arrives to pick Augusta up. Now, I was surprised because I didn't remember this Joseph at all from when I was a kid, but I guess having heard it on audio only, I wouldn't have remembered his face. And I was shocked because I recognized the actor who plays Joseph. He takes Augusta home to pack, and she packs a photo of Lionel. Julia arrives to find out just what the heck is going on. And she asks Julia to trust her. And she sends Julia away, and she doesn't even want to meet Joseph. Joseph tells Augusta that she's a wonderful woman, and he wishes they really were running away together.
Something is afoot.
Augusta says, everyone must think that we are. No one can know any different. So this is an interesting twist. Usually people, maybe go into witness protection or something. Did she testify against her parents in some crooked land deal? I don't know. Like, what could be Augusta's reason for pretending she's fallen in love with someone else so she can leave town?
I don't know. Maybe she witnessed something on her trip, or, maybe it's something Lionel related that she's trying to protect Lionel in some way.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it could be, and I assume it's revealed years from now when she finally comes back to the show. But for now, I've got no idea what it is. So. Lionel has a flashback, which has. As time goes by on it, over the images. And then Lionel shows up at the airfield, and they've really made it look like the airfield in Casablanca with a lot of fog and the camera direction. And he tries to talk her out of it one last time, but she says she's got to go, and she gets on the plane, and they play as time goes by.
Now, I do believe that Lionel and Augusta are divorced at this point.
True.
So that will free up Lionel to marry someone else, potentially.
The gang meets Lily in the tent revival meeting. Cece says, is this another one of your long-lost relatives washed ashore? Gina says, Haley is my only living relative. She tells Gina, Lily tells Gina that this is her last chance at salvation. Gina has brought along a flask from which she's been drinking and takes the opportunity to splash her drink on Lily because she doesn't want to hear that. Gina starts ranting at Mason, and Cece tells Keith to take her home. Gina is taken out, and as she is, she shouts, soon you'll be begging me to stay in your house. So she's mentioned this many times to Keith and Cece, but without Kelly in the picture, that's just going to be on hold indefinitely. Just like the high school reunion, apparently.
It is. Now, I'm assuming when Kelly comes back and Gina's plan unspools itself, we'll actually see that she has a bit more of a bite to go with her bark in this situation. So that'll be kind of fun because everyone's blowing her off right now.
I mean, originally, when she put all that evidence in the locker, it seemed like it would just be for a few weeks or a couple of months until Kelly got out of the mental institution. But now, Robin Wright's going to be gone for, I think, 4 months. So that's a long time to drag that out. And I guess Gina will need something else to do.
Yeah.
I don't think she'll be focused on her cookie business. Lily's televised broadcast begins. So people around Santa Barbara will be watching this tent meeting that didn't make it to the actual show. Keith tries to make love to Gina, but she's too dizzy from having drunk so much. And she's kind of freaked out that Lily looks like her. Cruz arrives and tells them that he thinks that they switched Santana's pills and that Keith was in the car with Santana. And he's going to get them both. And he thinks it'll be interesting to see which of them squeals first, because then they can throw the other of the two under the bus. And after Cruz leaves, they eye each other to see if either of them is going to tattle on the other.
Well, we know that both of them are probably quite accomplished at, throwing other people under the bus, and we've certainly seen that most recently with Keith completely dispensing with Santana, who he was professing his love to, just before the incident.
Nick convinces Cruz to visit Santana to tell her the good news that the pills have been analyzed and they have identified that the pills were made to look exactly like her allergy pills. But the visit goes poorly when Cruz has to tell her that they still are unable to tie the switch to Gina or Keith. While Nick and Cruz are chatting in the hallway, Santana sees Lily on the television and thinks it's Gina trying to drive her crazy, and she smashes the television, causing Cruz to run back into the room, and Santana basically says she doesn't need him in her life. And here's the engagement ring that Keith stole from your house. So, Cruz has his engagement ring for Eden back, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's whose ring it was, because I don't think that Cruz gave Santana an engagement ring. I could be wrong about that. So.
Keith stole it from what was in that lockbox. I mean, we assume it was for Santana, but now that for Eden. Now that I think about it, this might tie into a different storyline that hasn't really taken hold yet. So we'll see if I'm right. Mason and Lily visit Mary's grave. She tells him to keep his mind and heart on his path of light, not to be distracted by his old life. Mason says he doesn't know how he can repay her. And, those of us wondering if she's a con artist are thinking, this might be exactly why a wealthy heir to a wealthy fortune might have been targeted by someone like her.
Well, it must be sad that it is a very small tent revival meeting, and we don't actually see any of her other followers.
No.
So Mason does seem to be very targeted in this.
Mason did mention other followers, though, a couple of days ago, so maybe we'll meet them, or maybe it will focus on Lily. Sophia wonders if Kelly will be home in time for the wedding. Because remember, originally they were planning it for November. And it looks like, that's probably the date when it's going to be, the November sweeps. So we'll see.
Now, we've actually calculated, I think, in the past that Cece's wedding, Cece's birthday, which has been the focal point of things for at least 2 seasons, I think. We think that takes place in October, conveniently. So maybe that will be the focal point of something, too.
Mason arrives to tell them that Lily is settled into the guest house. Then he makes a crack about Cece when they were growing up, wanting his kids to think of him as the Pope. And then he says, "Oh, Lily warned me it would be hard to drop my old habits around you." Sophia asks if Lily knows that she can call the house if she needs something. And Cece says, Well, if she needs help moving the furniture, she can just use the power of her mind. So he is likening her to spoon benders and telekinetics. After Mason goes to bed, Cece says to Sophia, "How can you trust someone who looks so much like Gina?" And we get to see Lily settling into the Capwell guest house. She pours herself a drink, takes a pack of cigarettes from a hiding place and lights one. And as she takes a drink, she says, "Here's to you, Lily. May all of your wishes come true."
So this is a really great visual clue that probably all the folks suspecting Lily of being a con artist are maybe right, because booze and cigarettes don't really go with, Christian saviors.
Mm-hmm. And just from the general grammar of television of the time, people who smoked were evil. So this is our clue that Lily is up to no good, probably there to steal some portion of the Capwell fortune if she can.
Mm-hmm.
We had cast credits today, and they're the same as last time. Rosa and Augusta are still back in the credits after being missing for one short time. And Joseph was played by Andrew Massett. Now, the reason I know him is because the very first episode of Days of Our Lives that I ever watched, he was about to marry Hope. He played Larry Welch on Days of Our Lives way back when they still had characters like Chris Kosacek and Megan Hathaway on the show. Megan Hathaway, of course, has recently returned from the dead on Days of Our Lives. So
No one is ever truly dead on Days of Our Lives.
And last time we saw Larry Welch on Days of Our Lives was when several characters made a brief trip to hell a few months ago. That is it for week 108 of Santa Barbara. And the summer's coming to an end, so I'll give you a wrap-up on how my summer job went, and we'll have a wrap-up of Expo 86 next week, too, because I found a passport from Expo with all the stamps, so we might go through that and see. I think it might have belonged to my dad. And we'll be back with week 109 after we watch episode 527. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's right, Cece. Kicked me out. I guess it's force of habit, huh? Well, pretty soon you're going to be begging me to stay.
Well, if it isn't the black sheep turned lily white.
We'll be back after we watch The Princess Bride. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Just in case. We'll be back after we watch episode 523. See you then.
Bye-bye.